Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, both to the live audience here in Cary, North Carolina, as well as everyone who is listening wherever you are all over the world. If you are listening, please let us know. We want to know your name. We want to know where you are listening in from. It means a lot to us to know that people are taking part in our Torah study.
And Judy and Debbie are in the chat.
Fantastic. Very good. Today is May 31st, 2016. We are finishing the third book of the Torah this week, the book of Vayikra. So the parsha, the portion of the week, discusses blessings that the Jews are given if they will be listening to the Torah. There's also a lot of the opposite, but we're not going to talk about the opposite. We're going to talk about the blessings. And before I begin, I want to say it's a rough day for me today. Those that are on my Facebook know that we lost a dear friend of ours yesterday. It was a young girl. She was 29 years old that lived in the Raleigh-Cary area the last couple of years. She was at Duke because she had a lung transplant 4 years ago. And ever since the lung transplant, she had to live in the vicinity in case there were ever complications, which there always was. And she, from a young age, battled one condition after another condition, and was such a source of inspiration for me and light, and lived life with such both courage and optimism, despite having challenges none of us can even imagine in terms of her health. She was fighting for her life from the day she was born. A very rare condition called Bloom's. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. Much rarer than some of the other Ashkenazi diseases that you may have heard of. But this one is very rare. It's called Bloom's disease, and she and it was her funeral is actually taking place right now. So I may go in later to do the Shiva in New York, but her funeral is actually taking place right now. So definitely on my mind as we have this class today, so we can dedicate the class in memory of Rivki Der and Rivka Bas Yisroel. Okay. So the parsha has blessings. The Jewish people, the page is 84. 84. 84. And we know that there's often not justice in the world. Bad things happen to good people. And one of the things that Jews have always held on to is understanding that not everything happens in this world. If this world was it, we would have a lot of questions. But one of the biggest questions to why bad things happen to good people is the fact that this isn't the only world. Our soul passes through here for a certain amount of time with a mission, but there is what we call Olam Ha'emet, the world of truth, a world where things are as they ought to be, because that's often not the case in this world. And that's something that Jews have always held on to. It's important. What is surprising, though, is that concept is very absent from where? Right. And certainly the 5 books of Moses. That concept of there's an afterlife, there's another world, our souls continue to exist, something so important to many of the discussions that we have together on sessions like this, or particularly if anyone took the JLI we had at the beginning of this year, which was all about the afterlife, it's not there. And that's going to be one of the things we're going to discuss today. And if there is ever a place for it to be there, it should be in the portion this week. Because the portion discusses that if you follow my mitzvot, you'll be rewarded. And certainly in biblical times, there was a very strong correlation between the behavior of the Jews and what happened to them. If you study the prophets, it's almost like a roller coaster. Jews are serving God, doing mitzvot, they're the superpower, They win the wars, everyone's happy, they start serving idols and mess up, the prophet rebukes them, the Plishtim, the Philistines invade them, right? It's a roller coaster throughout Tanakh. There is a strong correlation between their spiritual behavior and what transpires physically. Yes?
I would say that mystically there are sections that are discussing an afterlife.
I would say so too, but why leave it for the mystics? It should be black and white. When the Torah tells us do not kill, it doesn't leave that to the mysticism. It tells us do not murder in the Ten Commandments. When it tells us eat matzah, so
the Torah's focus on teaching us how to behave and make the material world.
But wouldn't it be nice a little of it? A little of it. I understand what you're saying. We're gonna discuss that today.
Well, and to get Rabbi's point, it tells us uncountable times, because I said so. Fear me, fear God. Well, how about adding in somewhere explicitly? There's more to come.
Right.
You should fear me.
or a little motivation over there.
Yeah.
So, but if there was a time, and if you say the Torah doesn't discuss reward and punishment, well, yes, it does. If you look in the portion this week, Brian, why don't we begin? Text 1, page 84.
If you follow my statutes and observe my commandments and perform them, I will give you rains in their time, and the land will yield its produce, and the tree of the fruit will give forth its fruit. Your threshing will last until the vintage, and the vintage will last until the sowing, and you will eat your food to satiety, and you will live in security in your land. And I will grant peace in the land, and you will lie down with no one to frighten you. I will remove wild beasts from the land, and no army will pass through your land.
This is what the Jews want when they go to the land of Israel. This is all the brachos.
Well, I didn't see the milk and honey, but okay.
Probably in there somewhere. But enough food, peace. You go to sleep at night without fear. That's a big bracha. So this is the sort of thing that is promised to the Jewish people in this parsha of the Chukotai. If you observe my mitzvot, you observe my statutes, you will have success in the land. And the surprise to any of the religious folk out here is that it? Just this world? If we're discussing rewards, shouldn't this be the place to say, there's Olam Haba, there's Olam Ha'amet, there's a world to come, there is a world of truth. And this is not just a question we've asked today. Many of the commentators ask this question, and this is the parsha in which they ask the question. Stepping what's text 2. This is from the 1300s. Rabbi Yosef Albo asks, page 85.
They do it the English way.
They go the other way. Yeah.
Right.
Spanish rabbi and philosopher.
One more. Oh, just read the
the question that both the earlier and later sages have not ceased to ask. Why isn't the spiritual reward explicitly mentioned in the Torah, as the material rewards are?
Right.
What's most difficult in all this is that if Torah doesn't mention the spiritual promises, which are the main reward, then why does it mention the material promises, which are secondary?
So a two-part question. Lest you say the Torah doesn't want to get into reward and punishment at all, well, how come it mentions physical reward, which we believe is secondary? And by the way, spiritual reward doesn't just mean world to come. Guess what else it could say? You'll live meaningful lives. You'll have nachas from your children. I mean, there's a lot of other promises and blessings that people care deeply about, other than their bank account, their state of health, which are all important, don't get me wrong. But how come that is unnoticed, absent in the Torah? This is a question that is asked by Rabbi Yosef Albo. There is a follow-up question afterwards. I'll just paraphrase it. People of other faiths do believe in a system of divine reward and punishment for those who do his will and those that anger him. And they ask, how can the Torah be silent about it? All the other faiths of the time, he was saying, I assume he refers to Christianity, Middle Ages, placed great emphasis on the next world. And how come in the Torah itself that's absent? Okay, how come it's absent? How come it's absent? And
So
yes, the emphasis is on this. Yeah.
So I have a thought, and I know that we don't concern ourselves very deeply with other faiths,
Mhm.
but Christianity at least places great emphasis on faith.
Mm-hmm.
We place much emphasis on action.
Right.
And if you're going to place if you're going to have your society place a lot of emphasis on faith, it's probably even more important for them to have an afterlife to have faith in, or a motive or some such.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's that difference there.
That's interesting, yeah, because the emphasis is on the spiritual faith. Therefore, what's emphasized most is spiritual, while in Judaism the emphasis is on the physical world, and therefore, even when the Torah does mention promises, it relates it to physical. That's an interesting parallel. Does it answer the question, or is it just, it is a parallel. Absolutely right. It does.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Debbie is saying Torah does mention in one place about honoring parents will provide a long life. She's not saying where, though.
Well, that is actually in the Ten Commandments. But once again, at least literally, the long life seems to be talking about this world. So it's another example of it. Now, it is true that the commentaries mention, guess what? It may not be this world. That may only happen in the world to come. We'll have a story about that later that I shared with you a few weeks ago. Remember that boy that climbed the ladder? Did we do that here? I think we did. So, but that would be another example, Debbie, of the Torah could have said in order that you'll have a long life in the next world. The Torah could have done that. It does not. It again says in this world. It again says in this world.
And if we're reincarnating to refine our soul, what do we need a heaven for?
That is a question that we had in. Did you take the soul journeys?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it got into reincarnation, and I don't want to go off in detail, but even though yes, Judaism does believe in a certain in reincarnation in the sense that a soul comes down to finish a mission, we mentioned in that class that according to the Arizal, who is one of the main Kabbalists, he discusses souls after they depart. Part of the soul finishes its mission in the world. That goes on to the next world. Part of the soul does not finish its mission in the world. And it's not even that it did something wrong, that usually isn't. It's more about not actualizing part of what it had to do. You see the difference? If it did something wrong, guess where that's also dealt with?
The next world.
The next world. It's more about what part of our personality do we explore and discover in our lives, and what part of our personality lays dormant. So the Kabbalists say it's mostly the parts that lay dormant, so gesund, or certain mitzvot that we had to do and did not do, not that we did sins, mitzvot that we should have done and did not do, that has to come down again in this reincarnation. And the soul, the mystics explain, sort of like cells break off and become whole new organisms. Similarly, the souls have the ability, part of the soul, to break off and enter another life. So but that is a very good question that a lot of people ask. Either you believe in an afterlife or you believe in reincarnation. How can both coexist? And the Kabbalists do explain how both can coexist. Briefly, but okay, does that answer? Okay. Returning to the texts here.
Demonstrating even more why we can use some clarity in the text.
Correct.
As opposed to
Leaving
deep
this.
Kabbalism to try and figure it out.
Exactly. There is an optional section here that is parenthetical. What time do we got? 12:02. Do it briefly. If you look at the Parsha, there are, again, there are many blessings. It's nice. There's 11 verses of blessings. 20, this is going to be text 4 on 87. There are 11 verses of blessings, and there's 29 verses of curses, which is, whoa, wait a minute, why? You know, it's a question sometimes we're asked, so that is something else the commentaries are bothered by, and you would think that the power of good should be that much more than that. Two answers are given here. Text 4 is actually the Midrash. The oral tradition says from the beginning that The blessings begin with the letter Aleph. It says, if you listen to me, how do you say if in Hebrew? Im. And it finishes with, I'll stand with you upright. Komamute. Komamute means upright. Komamute ends with what letter? Taf. So really the blessings are Aleph through Taf. This is not everything. This is just a small sample of what awaits you, but it means from A to Z, Aleph through Taf. And the Midrash says, if you look at the curses, it's exactly the opposite. It begins and ends with letters that are next door neighbors to each other, to show that there's not a wider variety. Yeah, that's one answer that's given. The second answer that's given, I think, is, let's do that one inside. Text 5 from the Medrash.
A man of flesh and blood who wishes to harm his enemy does so suddenly, so that he does not suspect it. However, the Holy One, blessed be he, warned Pharaoh before each and every plague, so that he should repent.
And the same is true in the 30, how many verses did I say are the curses? 31 verses. It says, there's about a couple verses of curses, and then it says, hopefully you'll get the message. If you don't, then da-da-da-da-da-da. If you don't, then da-da-da. So it's not really all those curses. It is broken up, and God doesn't want to do it all away. And if we look in the story of the prophets, that is indeed what happened. It's only when the Jews did not get the message, and when things were happening to them, they didn't correct their behavior, but rather, as the Parsha explains, they behaved in a way of Keri, like the name of our town. And what does Keri mean? Just a coincidence. That's not happening for any reason. The word Keri repeats itself over and over and over in the Parsha. It means a coldness. It means happenstance. So when you don't get the message, then it's going to continue coming. So whenever I always point it out on the week of when we discuss it, the word Keri. In any event, but the idea is that God doesn't just punish right away, but there is a consideration for every single one, and it's a lesson for us. Anytime we have to discipline, we think long and hard before we do it. There was a beautiful story of the previous Rabbi who was ill at the end of his life, and he was under constant medical care. And once they were giving him an injection, and before they gave him the shot, what do all doctors do? They
this negative possibility, etc.
So, well, no. What do they do? They
procedure.
rub, they rub all the alcohol, and they make sure it's completely sterile, and then they give the injection. So he says, what a lesson! Any time in life, before you give someone a shot, in other words, any time in life you give someone constructive criticism, right? You're giving them a shot for their benefit, but you're rebuking. You are saying something sharp. Make sure to completely sterilize the area beforehand. I like that. It's a beautiful lesson. In other words, is there any personal agenda over here? Am I going more than I have to? Stop, clean the area completely, and then do it, So it's all parenthetical.
That's good.
What?
Criticizing in private.
Exactly, in private. That would be a very good example of dirty versus clean. When something's in public, you're giving the injection and making schmutz, everyone's going to talk about it, everyone's going to know about it. You have to make sure it's discreet and clean and private and constructive at the right time, so on and so forth. Nice parenthetical story, but that's, again, so that was a side question. Why more blessings than curses? 2 answers, A to Z, as well as the fact that the curses are in sequence, but not all at once. Okay, let's go back to our main question, and that is, how come the Torah is absent about spiritual rewards, whether that's the afterlife or whether that is meaningful life, nachas from the children, so on and so forth. This question makes its way to the Kuzari. Anyone familiar with the Kuzari? No. So in the 1000s, there was a Jewish philosopher by the name of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, Rabbi Yehuda HaLevi. And he wrote one of the best known philosophical works in Judaism. This is a little bit before Maimonides writes Guide to the Perplexed, which is but the Kuzari is a very famous book. And he makes a discussion in his book as if it's a debate between a king and different faiths. And the Kuzari is the name of the king. And he asks the Christian person this and the Jewish person this, and there's a back and forth in the question. Many of the philosophical proofs we give about the belief in God or how Torah is true, it comes from this book, the Kuzari. So he writes in that book, 89, where are we up to in the reading? Yeah?
Do not be a slave.
Sorry, 89, page 89.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Text 7.
I'm sorry.
No.
Said the Kuzari, I see that the promises of the others are richer and more ample than your promises.
So the Kuzari, so to speak, it's a fable, but this king turns to the rabbi, the one representing Judaism, and says, the other faiths are promising better stuff than you are, you know? There's so much about the afterlife, whether, again, you would probably have Islam in there as well, and Christianity. This is not so highlighted so much in Judaism. So that is the question that he asks. And it's not just the Kuzari that was bothered by this. There is a very interesting teaching in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers. And those that are coming to tomorrow night's class, we're going to explore this. This is in the way beginning of Ethics of Our Fathers. And one of the sages taught as follows, text 8a.
Do not be as slaves who serve their master for the sake of reward. Rather, be as slaves who serve their master not for the sake of reward. And the fear of heaven should be upon you.
So what is, his name was Atignos. What is Atignos teaching over here? What's his teaching?
Freedom.
What is it? What is he saying?
Goodness for the sake of goodness.
Correct. In our relationship with Hashem and God and doing mitzvahs and being good to other people, we shouldn't be asking, what's in it for me? We should do what's right because it's right. We should do what's right because it's fulfilling God's will. We shouldn't always be looking for what's in it in return. This was this great rabbi, who was a very prominent rabbi, Atignos' big teaching in life. Guess what? It had big consequences. There were a few of his students that misunderstood their teacher. And they thought what the teacher is saying is, there is no reward. There is no afterlife. There is nothing else. And one of the most famous of these students, his name was Tzadok, and he started a whole new sect of Judaism called the Tzedukim, the Sadducees. Because I don't know why they couldn't have had a little chat over coffee just to clarify this, but this is how problematic this issue was and how it led to these consequences. It says that. The commentary on Pirkei Avot, 8b, tells us, and?
8b.
Right, 8b.
Antigonus of Soko had 2 students who would study his words, study them with students, and those students with their own students. They examined them and said, why would our fathers say such a thing? Can a laborer work for an entire day and not receive his pay in the evening? Surely our fathers had our fathers known there's another world and that there is a resurrection, they would not have said this.
So it must be that there is no another world, and that's why they taught this. Keep on going.
They separated from the Torah, and from them emerged 2 breakaway groups. I don't know.
Tzadukim and Baisusim. Tzadukim after Tzadok, and Baisusim after Batos. In other words, because there's confusion in this matter, there was a lot of negative things that happened, furthering the question, why could the Torah not have been more clear and just said outright, there is another world.
Why
there is another world. Now let me go back to Atignos before I take that question. What did Atignos mean when he said this teaching?
I mean, you expect a reward for the hard
Should
work
you expect a reward or should you not?
That's not why you should do the action.
But you're not a laborer.
He meant this shouldn't be the motivation. Do it from your heart. How, maybe marriage is a good example. Let's talk about marriage or a real relationship. How if someone enters into a marriage and everything is tit for tat, right? I'm doing this in order that I expect. That's a recipe for disaster. Not only because you'll always be unhappy, but because that's not a relationship. Relationship meaning doing it for the other person. That being said, if you're always giving and giving and not receiving, guess what? That's also a recipe for disaster, because you have to feel a relationship. So what I think Atignos is saying is, of course, there's going to be a place where goodness happens to good people. But that shouldn't be the motivation. Don't be like those people that are just doing it for the sake of reward. But he didn't mean to say there is no reward. There is, of course, God has a relationship back to you. It's not one-sided. But his students didn't understand that. And to that they said, Torah has high demands. Why should I do all this if I'm not getting anything in return? So they scratched it. Yes?
Are those two breakaway religions still in existence?
They're not. They're not. They were very prominent at the end of the Second Temple, 2,000 years ago, 2,100 years ago. Exactly.
But I never heard of the Baitusim. But the Tzedukim is, why did one survive and not the other? Do we know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Even the Tzedukim didn't survive. Later, there was another reincarnation of the Tzedukim called the Karaites. But that was slightly different. They believed in the written law, not the oral law. Slightly different.
Right.
Some of their philosophy came from the Tzedukim, but there's no Sadducees today.
No.
So it didn't last either, right?
They must have caused more trouble.
They did. If you read the whole story, they were at the end of the Second Temple, they were very, very corrupt. They were in control of the powerful positions. They fought their way into office. The Tzedukim caused a lot of problems to the Jews at the end of the Second Temple.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Debbie has another comment here about doing stuff. She said, do humans do anything without some motivation? For the sake of spiritual afterlife is a motivation. For the benefit of another human is a motivation. For self-benefit is a motivation.
Correct. Certainly, good question, Debbie. Certainly, and this would, I'm going to answer with the Hasidic answer, and in Tanya it explains that we have different forces inside of us, an animal soul and a godly soul. Most of the time we operate at least partially based on our animal soul. And as far as our animal soul is concerned, there must be some motivation of self. Even if it's something as subtle as, this makes me feel good. That's very subtle, right? I'm giving I think everyone in the room would agree that there's nothing wrong with that at all. But there's still a touch of, I couldn't walk by that poor person, I would feel horrible afterwards. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, it's purely for them. So what it says in Tanya is most of us, almost all of us, most of our actions have a touch of the animal soul, and as a result, we'll have a small taste of the animal soul. The question is, how much of it and how bad? There is doing things totally for ulterior motives, like I want a lot of respect, I want a lot of honor. And then there's the more subtle ones, world to come, my soul. But what it does say in Tanya is we also have the capacity on those rare occasions that we're operating only from the vantage point of our godly soul, where it's truly for someone else and truly for God. But to expect someone to always live that way, unless you're a completely righteous woman or man, I don't think that's a possibility. And Torah acknowledges that. And that's why Torah acknowledges these rewards. And therefore the question, again, reinforcing that question, why couldn't Torah help our animal soul along a little bit and reinforce these ideas that there is a spiritual world that follows?
Why do we believe that there needs to be anything beyond this life? Why does
so let's take that question now. So maybe you say, well, the Torah doesn't mention it, so prove to me that there is that. So if you look later in the Torah, past the 5 books of Moses, into the prophets, there's a few stories in the prophets that allude to far deeper than the Torah of an afterlife. In the 5 books of Moses, it's very vague. Certain righteous individuals, when they pass away, Abraham, Sarah, what is the word it uses? Vayasef elamav, they were gathered to their people. Does that allude to some sort of...
Maybe.
I'm sure a devil's advocate would just say it's an expression that just like their ancestors had passed away, so too they have passed away. But they have been gathered to their people seems to imply some sense of uniting, souls uniting. Very powerful. Many of the great people, it says they were by Asaf Elamav. But in the prophets, how were you going to?
With Jacob, it says he took his last breath. It never says and died. Mm-hmm. Where everyone else also died.
What Moses?
It says passed away.
Moses, did
It
he
says
die?
died. It does say
Okay.
die. It does say die. But by Jacob, it doesn't actually say
Right.
he passed away, leading to that idea that Jacob didn't die. And then, of course, in the prophets, we have the story of Elijah the prophet, which is for another occasion. We're going to learn an interesting one here. I don't think we've ever discussed this at the Lunch and Learn. So there's a period of King David's life where he is on the run. Why is he on the run? He's becoming quite popular. The previous king Saul, things were already going downhill. He wasn't listening to, he was a righteous person primarily, but a few little mistakes he made, and he was told that his kingdom was not going to continue after him. King David is already anointed by the prophet, but privately. He's not yet accepted by the people yet. He has to wait his turn. Then he rises to fame when he does what? Kills Goliath. Very good. After he kills Goliath, the other king Saul becomes envious of this youngster who everyone is right. And he doesn't want the honor, but it's chasing after him. And sadly, he has to flee from Shaul. Shaul's after his life. And we have many chapters in the book of Samuel where he's running for his life. So there's one time where he's running for his life, and he and his gang, he had a little bit of a following, are starving. They have no food. And they happen to come across a guy whose name is Naval. And Naval was a guy he had helped earlier in his life. And Naval was very rich and had orchards and farms. So he's on the run. He's like, thank God, finally we've come to a place where we can get a bite to eat. They're starving, literally starving, have nothing to eat. And he's all nice, and he says, you probably remember the favor I did for you the other day. Would it be possible to get, stay here for the night and get a bite for the guys? And he said, absolutely not. You can't take, he gives him this sharp answer.
Minuval.
No, he's a minuval. The word naval in Hebrew means...
You don't want to be one.
So King David says, you want that? All right. And King David also thought of himself somewhat. He was a king, but he wasn't a king. And if you're a king and someone does that to you, then there's consequences. There's consequences. Even in Torah law, there has to be a certain respect. So King David gathers his folks and he says, if you're not giving to us, this means war. Okay. So King David is actually prepared for violence until Naval's wife, whose name is Abigail, comes to the rescue. She's the wise woman, and she calms him down. And she says, you don't want to I know you want to kill my husband right now. And first of all, she says, I know he's a good for nothing. That's the best. I know he's a good for nothing. I know he's a good for nothing. However, just imagine, that's what you want to do. You want to kill him because he's a good for nothing. Do you realize what this is going to do to you? And she says, text 9a, wise woman. Yeah.
And a man has arisen to pursue you and to seek your soul. But my Lord's soul shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord your God, while the soul of your enemies, God will sling it with the hollow of the sling.
And I wish it gave us some more verses here. She gives a beautiful speech, and she basically says, if you make this blunder, you're going to forever suffer, both in this world, and she says, in the world of, but if you act with, you hold back, your soul will be bound in the bundle of life, and the soul of your enemies God will deal with. Until I prepared for this class, I forgot that this is one of the strongest allusions to an afterlife in the Torah. By the way, this has also made its way to our liturgy. Bound in you ever see these words, Tzura b'tzur hachayim? That's part of the ceremony at a funeral. They use these words. In fact, on a Jewish gravestone, there's a few letters traditionally. There's a Taf, a Nun, Tzadik, Bet, Hey, Hey. You see those letters on most Jewish gravestones, and it's an acronym for their soul shall be bound in the bundle of life. That's where that comes from, those letters. So, and the commentators explain, what does it mean? What does it mean when she says she'll be bound in the bundle of life? It means after the soul's separation from the body, your soul will continue to live and be plugged into the source of life. So here, this is a pretty powerful place in the prophets that allude to this idea. Yeah.
Why do we think she said that to him? Is she a prophetess, or what's going on?
We would need to study that story on its own. It's a good story. Was she just trying to save her husband? Is that, you know what the end of the story is, by the way?
No.
She fed him a lot of food.
Okay.
Her husband got so upset the next day, he had a heart attack. Really? Really? There's also another postscript to the story. She ended up marrying much later on King David. So there's a, we really, learning Samuel together would be Shmuel. It's fascinating. What was that?
She had the hot spot.
No. In any event, she's seen as a very righteous woman, Abigail. And I believe, is Abigail mentioned amongst the prophetesses? Debbie, can you look that up? Is Abigail mentioned amongst the prophetesses? Please let us know. There's a list of all the Nevi'im, and she might be Debbie. So if you can look that up, that'll be great, Debbie. Okay. Let us continue. It gives another example as well of King Saul, but we're going to skip that text. Perhaps the strongest verse in the Torah that alludes to this idea is text 11. Jackie, why don't you read text 11? King Solomon writes in Kohelet.
And the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it.
So body is death is an inverse of birth. The soul returns to its place and the body returns to its place. So this also is part of the words that we say at the funeral. But we do have examples in the prophets, and most of it comes from the Talmud, Midrash, Kabbalah, again, furthering the question, if this was a Jewish belief, and it was a Jewish belief way back when, how come it is so absent from our world? Okay.
Well, who came up with the ideal of in the world to come?
Well, that's what we're saying. It was always part of Jewish belief. The prophets mentioned to it. So that's our question. I believe that it was a traditional Jewish belief. I do not believe, as some critics want to say, that it was an invention of the rabbis in that era. No, I believe that it was always part of Torah. And if that is the case, how come it is absent? How come the Torah doesn't promise it? How come in this week's Parsha, when it's telling us to do what's right, it doesn't mention it?
But it seems like it's a physical world and the world to come. It seems like it's still a physical world.
No. Olam Haba is
spiritual world.
Is the soul continues to exist. There's another concept of Mashiach, but for another discussion. Now, so what are the medieval scholars who answered this question? These are the main two answers given. 14a, page 95. The Ibn Ezra, who lived in the 1500s, writes,
The opinion of Rabbi Avraham ben Ezra, being that the Torah was not just given to the individual, but to all, and only 1 in 1,000 will understand matters of the world to come, for they are profound. Therefore, the discussion centers on the reward in this world.
Torah has to talk to the lowest common denominator, and you start promising heaven, people can get the wrong idea, as we have sadly seen that idea, convoluted in other faiths. So therefore, the Torah keeps it practical and simple. That's what the Ibn Ezra, is that the Ibn Ezra?
Yeah.
That's what he suggests, that the Torah in general talks about physical, down-to-earth ideas that everyone can understand, and leaves the more mystical ideas to Kabbalah and other things. So that's his answer. Maimonides, 14b, gives another answer.
In the opinion of the Rambam, all of these promises are not the actual reward. All the good and bad consequences mentioned here are only speaking of the removal of hindrances. If you observe my commandments, I will take away any obstacles to their observance, like war, illness, and famine, so that you will be able to serve God without any hindrance. However, the primary reward of the world to come is not mentioned here, so that one will serve his Creator for its own sake and not for reward or out of fear of punishment.
So Maimonides writes, the Torah is really not giving us reward in this parsha. What is it doing?
It's keeping you on the straight and narrow.
And this is what I think is, when we all pray Rosh Hashanah and throughout the year, I think this is a beautiful thing to have in mind. It's not that we're asking for reward. It's God, I want to do your work in the world. Make it easy for me.
Give me a chance.
Give me a chance. I can do it much better if I'm healthy, I have the means to give tzedakah and do kindness to other people. Sometimes God has funny ideas what our mission is, right? But we turn to Hashem and we say, I can be a much better servant of yours. Health, proper livelihood, so on and so forth. So that's Maimonides' opinion. He says the Torah is never giving rewards. The Torah is telling us that if we focus our attention on doing what's right, Hashem will help us in that endeavor. Let's go now to the Hasidic answer. And the Hasidic answer, a few of you touched on it today, and we'll now spend the last few minutes explaining it. It is so important in the Torah for us to understand what the purpose of creation is. If the Torah were to highlight an afterworld, an afterlife, what could easily happen? That becomes the emphasis of creation. That becomes the emphasis of life. Torah is so far from that, as opposed to other faiths that say that this world is just a place of transition, and we get tested here, but it's all about the next world. Judaism argues with that all the way and says the purpose of creation is this world. This is the world where we do mitzvahs. This is the world where we make a difference. Of course, there is a world of truth in which we see the fruits of our labor in this world. Because while we're in this world, Dan, we don't often see the effect of our mitzvahs. And there's another world where we see the effect of that and the effect of, God forbid, we have to live with the mistakes we made. But that's not the emphasis. The emphasis is on this world. There's a beautiful story of the Vilna Gaon, who was a great sage living in Lithuania. And in his final moments before he passed away, he started crying. And his students asked him, what are you crying? Are you afraid of what will happen? He says, I'm not afraid. I'm just holding my tzitzit. And I'm crying for my tzitzit, which I will not be able to wear in the next world. Isn't that a beautiful story? What?
La'ag larash. That's why
Exactly.
you can't.
You don't. That's why there's a tradition of not wearing tzitzit, or at least hiding tzitzit if you're in a. Interesting.
Tzitzit.
There's a tradition, and I do this when I go to a cemetery. I tuck in my tzitzit. Why? You don't want to mock, so to speak. We have the ability to do good deeds in the world, and they do not. So absolutely, there's another world, and that's spiritual retirement. But we don't want to spiritually retire. Spiritual retirement is much more enjoyable. Spiritual retirement is much more blissful than this world. That's not what it is about at all. And Judaism, Torah has to go so far to prove that point, that the emphasis is only on the physical. That is why we are told in Ethics of Our Fathers, we'll finish maybe with this text 17. Well, let's do 15. Let's do 15 first. This is the text the Rabbi wrote about this issue, text 15.
There is significance to the fact that Scripture does not say much on the topic of afterlife. This is for the simple reason that at its core, Judaism involves life in this world, namely, how it is to be conducted in accordance with the will of God as delineated in the Torah. Fulfilling mitzvah every day.
We should relish. Every day is a blessing. Why is it a blessing? I can do mitzvot in the world. And every single day we should, decline that. Okay. Every single day we have the opportunity to mitzvot in the world. We shouldn't be distracted by what happens afterwards. The emphasis in this world. And that is why in Ethics of Our Fathers, we'll conclude with this text 17, it writes as follows.
A single moment of repentance and good deeds in this world is greater than all of the world to come, and a single moment of bliss in the world to come is greater than all of the present world.
And is that a contradiction? That is one teaching, one Mishnah says two different ideas. It starts off saying a moment of teshuvah and ma'asim tevim in this world is better, and then it goes on to say a moment of bliss in the world to come is better. Which one is it? Brian, what's the answer?
Both, Brian.
I'm perplexed.
What?
I'm perplexed, sorry.
Read Maimonides.
So the answer is, it doesn't. If you're asking what is more blissful, what is more enjoyable, It's saying the next world is. What's better? This world. A single moment of good deeds in this world is infinitely greater than anything we can achieve in the next world. Because in the next world, we can no longer do mitzvot. We can have loved ones down here, perpetuate our name with mitzvot, but there's no longer an opportunity. So it says every moment of good deeds in this world is better than what we can achieve, better than what we can accomplish, and truly greater than the next world. However, you want to know in terms of enjoyment, relaxation, goodness in terms of truth, it's in the next world. And the time will come when we will all willing experience that, but that's not Judaism. Judaism is about relishing every single day, to wake up in the morning, God give me another day, how can I do mitzvot in the world? And we'll conclude with that. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
A
Hal.
slightly extended teaching is when it talks about these are the rewards, and then it says these are the punishments.
Yes.
I believe this is a Chabad teaching, because that's where I read the commentary, that those aren't punishments, those are hidden blessings.
That's another idea as well. The hidden blessings. And there's a beautiful story about that. You
But
probably
why
read
do
that.
we need heaven and hell? I still don't understand. Why do we need a concept of heaven?
So
and hell?
they're the same way life didn't begin with this world, life doesn't end with this world. There's a spiritual existence and there's a physical existence. The souls exist in a spiritual existence before they come into our bodies, and they continue to exist because the soul is eternal. But what is the soul waiting for? When's its performance? What's it all about? Where is the where's the game happening?
Here.
Here. And then Hashem promises us, don't worry. Everything you work, you'll have a day where you'll benefit from it. And that's why it's important to hold on to this idea, because when we see injustice in the world, I think it is important to know not everything happens in this world. I need to hold on to that. When I see sad news happen, when I see good things happening to bad people and bad things happening to good people, this belief is very important for me to hold on to. And when someone passes away, it's very important for me to know, someone passes away, one moment they're here, the next moment they're not here. How could that be? And it's very important to hold on to that belief. Of course their spiritual soul is here, but we still cry. We still cry not only because we miss them, but we cry because their mission in this world is over. And they're in a better place, absolutely, but their mission in the world is over. And that is one of the things we're crying about. And that is why the take home from this class is every single day in this world, we have an opportunity to do many mitzvot, and we should grab them. We'll hold it over here. Thank you for all those tuning into the online class, and we will be back here next week, same time, same place. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me directly, yc@chabadofcary.org. And a special thanks to Nissan Communications for hosting today's program. Have a great week.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.